So I would like to welcome you on a pre-conference podcast for a virtual conference on product substance management and compliance. We have Tomás Novotny, the CEO of Regartis, and we have Buitenhuis, the product regulatory compliance specialist of Avery Dennison. Nice to see you, gentlemen. Today, we would have several topics to discuss, several pressing topics about EU's chemical strategy for sustainability, REACH, ROHS, the UK REACH, the approaching deadlines for the UK chemical regulations. I believe Tomás will elaborate a little bit more about the post-Brexit landscape of the UK and EU, chemical regulatory situation. And we'll also definitely speak a little bit about SKIP. So with no further ado, I would like to ask Christian, what would you say? Let's start with the EU chemical strategy for sustainability.
Well, Georgi, thank you for inviting me. And my job within Avery Dennison is to work with and to assure that the products we make comply with the regulations that apply, to the end use of the product, which in our case covers a broad spectrum of different regulations. And to come to your point about the chemical strategy for sustainability, that will of course have a big impact on us. Because the chemical strategy will definitely change the way we work with chemicals, the way we manufacture chemicals, and also the way we make products. Because it of course comes forward from the Green Deal that was published by the EU. And within this Green Deal, of course, there's a lot of focus on circular economy. Which is also something you find again in the chemical strategy, where circularity plays a big part, where creating basically a non-toxic or a clean waste stream is very important, because waste will need to be, let's say, our new raw materials to make products. And so in that sense, the chemical strategy will, for example, impact the type of chemicals that can be used in products, for example. So looking at the strategy, what has been published, it will have quite an impact on a number of regulations, not only REACH or for example, food contact materials or toys, because a lot of emphasis is also on making sure that the most harmful chemicals do not end up in consumer products. And for us, as a material science company, as a company also, for example, making adhesives and working with chemicals, it will have a big impact in the years to come, to make sure that we work within the boundaries of the regulation, and in line with all that is coming based on the chemical strategy for sustainability. We will probably be forced to think about how we're going to use chemicals, how we work with chemicals, how do we produce our chemical products as climate neutral as possible, to use as much renewable resources, use as less as possible water or energy, and create and make safe products.
First of all, thank you very much, Georgi, for inviting us. It's a real pleasure. We are in a position when we are closely observing the strategy for sustainability and how it will actually evolve into tangible and particular regulations and directives. We are a consultancy company, so we are in no position to take any position there. Although of course we have personal opinions, we have expert opinions how things could be or should be implemented. But at the end, from business perspective, it's really no difference from us for us how it really plays out, because clearly it will be additional. I don't want to put it as barrier or burden for the industry, but I would like to see it more as an opportunity for the society as a whole to take our global social responsibility to the next level. So from my perspective, just a personal opinion, I'm a big fan of the ambition of the EU to try to achieve circular economy, sustainability, but with a big question mark, how this will be achieved and how it should be achieved in a sensible way, not to put too much burden on the industry, but at the same time protecting the consumers, which we after all are. So there are big question marks in the particular concepts that the Green Deal and strategies for sustainability will bring. Things, for example, like further regulation of polymers, which will likely come in, I believe, 2022. The Commission has committed itself to issue some kind of regulation on polymers. And I've been watching closely how this develops. There was a huge study published recently, roughly 6 months ago, and it raises a lot of concerns among the industry, how polymers will be identified, how the polymers of concern will be identified, how it will be grouped. And there is a lot of uncertainty. It reminds me kind of when, for example, REACH was starting, when REACH was introduced, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of question marks. But at the end, REACH was adopted. It's been in place for 15 years now, and it seems like a good standard how the EU was able to significantly, not just incrementally, but really radically improve the level of safety, protection of human health, environment. And so I kind of perceive the strategy for sustainability as another big challenge ahead of especially industry, but also the society as a whole, to change the way we think about products, the change in our consumer habits, shopping habits, and all different aspects of life, basically.
If I can then just go along, the chemical strategy for sustainability, of course, sort of will also, further change, reform REACH. You heard Thomas talk about the polymers and the polymer registration in REACH, which will be something new, at least for the EU. I mean, polymer registration under REACH does happen in Korea, for example, under Korean REACH. So yes, I mean, I think that the chemical strategy for sustainability will certainly impact there as well, and it will present a lot of opportunities to companies as well, to make use of the positive things. And as Thomas correctly said, I mean, we as a society, we need to think about how we want to live with chemicals and what we find acceptable, let's say hazards or risk and whatnot. And if you look at let's say the current status of REACH, and for us, of course, recently we had an update of the SVHC list, which of course happens every 6 months. So 2 new substances were added. So we have now 211 chemicals on the list. And of course, if you look at REACH more broadly, EU REACH does no longer cover the UK anymore. So there is basically within Europe, we now have two different REACH regimes that we have to deal with and comply with. And in that sense, REACH is based on the chemical strategy also will be evolving into more complexity, I'm afraid, within at least within Europe already.
Tomás?
If I may add to that, regarding the current status of REACH, over the past 15 years since REACH was adopted, in my eyes, it was a period when the full potential of REACH was exploited to the extent as REACH was drafted and adopted originally. There were several steps amending REACH or clarifying a few items on the way. So the most notable ones would be the provisions on data sharing. That was a big step in 2016 when the rules which were there already from the beginning, but they were finally clarified how the economic operators should share the data under which conditions on the principles of fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory principles. There were, of course, some implementing technical, let's say, guidances or amendments. Of course, the testing methods, how to collect data on the properties of chemicals are constantly being developed, constantly being improved. Then there was recently the concept of endocrine disruptors, for example, introduced. Nanomaterials, but in my eyes, those were like bits, little pieces, important pieces, but little pieces which were added to the puzzle. But now, what we are facing here with the Green Deal and strategy and for sustainability is a complete whole new level of let's say further improvements or challenges to change the situation and how we manage, how we deal with chemicals in the EU.
If I may, let's say, continue to that. So for Avery Dennison, of course, we are not a chemicals manufacturer, so our focus on REACH is much less on let's say the whole data sharing part. But I think an important part for us as well was in 2015 when the European Court of Justice actually ruled that, for example, for SVHC communication, once an article, always an article. That also made things profoundly more complex and more interesting, and on the other side also more clear, of course. But that for us was also an important, let's say, ruling during the whole REACH era.
I fully agree. That was a huge case and huge ruling, huge milestone.
Well, what I always see when there is new regulation or whatever coming, there's a lot of backlash sounds a bit harsh, but there's always some hesitation. But what I also find is that with regarding a new regulation, there's more and more focus on the opportunities these new regulations offer, than focusing on the, let's say, the potential negative side of things. And I think it also depends very much on how the company is prepared and how your policy is actually, because most of these all have to do with chemicals. So how your policy is, how you've been working with chemicals within the company. And yeah, so I think the reactions will probably be a mixed bag.
I can only agree with that. After the initial hesitation or some reservations, I expect that it will become a standard which will be widely accepted. I don't see any big issue with that. Of course, it greatly depends on how, in particular, the strategy for sustainability will be implemented into the actual regulations. And the registration of polymers is a great example, because it can really be, we are talking about, the studies say maybe about 400,000 different materials, 400,000 different polymers. And only a small part of that is really raising concerns. So how this tiny little part, proportion of all the polymers that we have here will be targeted, that is the crucial question. So how these strategies and goals and ambitions will be translated into individual regulations, directives, whatever, will play the biggest role in the acceptance amongst the industry and all the stakeholders. And I also would like to highlight and emphasize that it's a mutual effort. It's a joint effort, not only from the industry, but also from the EU and from the authorities. In my experience, when I'm talking with the customers, talking with the industry, they are pretty much, they can usually manage. They, of course, after some reservations, hesitations, and open questions, how it will be handled, they can always manage, and they can also find benefits of anything that is introduced, but it has to be also fully enforced from the authorities. There has to be a leveled playing field for everybody. When the companies spend millions on compliance, on improving their supply chain, improving their environmental impacts and social impacts, they also want the others to be playing by the same rules. And so I find this as one of really critical items, which was claimed in the strategy for sustainability, that a lot of emphasis should be placed also on enforcement, that really everybody is playing by the same rules.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very important indeed, that we have a level playing field. And I was also, it's a good thing that it's also mentioned that also imports of articles, and that is for us as a downstream user, as a maker of articles, important. Because nowadays on the REACH, for example, you can still import articles containing actually Annex 14 substances. The way I understand, there now is an action point under this chemical strategy to let's say sort of close this loophole, and I think that would be fantastic if it could be achieved, because it makes doing business in Europe more fair for us European manufacturers of articles or chemicals, whatever, compared to outside. And I think also what we should not forget is that this strategy will not only impact us in Europe. This will have a global impact on businesses, and I think we will see in due course the good impact it can have on us, on society, as Thomas was already mentioning, not only in Europe, but starting in Europe and spreading globally. A bit like REACH.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Good point. Thank you for that. For me personally, it's very interesting because we originally had our headquarters, our company seat in the UK, in London. That was in 2015. There was no sign of Brexit, anything. And then all of a sudden we had to relocate. Well, we were operating from the Czech Republic anyway, mostly, but now we have two offices in the UK and in Prague, Czech Republic. So we were watching very closely the situation and how it will develop on both sides of the border, of the newly established border, re-established. And it was really, I don't know what to say, if to say funny or interesting or frustrating, probably a bit of all of these at the same time. I was doing regular presentations at different conferences, webinars on UK Reach and Brexit. In 3 years, I didn't have to change a slide on that presentation. Usually I only changed the date and the presentation was still the same. And then we reached well, 3 months of 2020 when finally things became clear. And it was from the beginning quite probably that it will play, if politically it will happen, that from the perspective of REACH and chemicals regulations, that we will end up with dual obligations, with basically two pieces of legislation, unless of course the UK would be willing to somehow access the single market, the economic area, and so on, or free trade union, whatever. But since UK was insisting on really separating in the way of pretty hard Brexit, it was quite obvious that we would have two pieces of legislation, one in the EU, one in the UK. Having said that, it has to be noted that it's basically 99% copy, which is good for the movement of free movement of goods, not free, but movement of goods, and for the companies who invested in EU Reach significant resources. Mm-hmm. So at the end, we have UK Reach, which is nothing new. There is nothing new. Everything is known. We know how it works from EU Reach. Everything is the same. And the only thing we are now dealing with is this transitional period, how to comply with dual obligations, which are the same on both sides of the border, but how to quickly become compliant or stay compliant on both sides of the border. For that, the UK Reach introduced transitional periods for the main obligations like registration, which will be allowed for the next 2, 4, or 6 years for the companies. And to be able to do that, they now have some simplified procedure of notification. Well, some called it a process similar to pre-registration in REACH, but I would totally disagree there. It's more similar to REACH inquiry process, because the companies need to provide data on the chemical analytical data. So it's not so easy and straightforward, but still the companies have the opportunity to do it quite quickly, and then have a decent period of time of 2, 4, 6 years to comply fully. So it's just only this transitional period, what I would call it, or how to become again or compliant in the UK or in the EU or both, that we are dealing with. Otherwise it's nothing new. And it basically comes down to the question of supply chain management. Lots of supply chains were disrupted, interrupted, or needed to be changed. And we are basically facing the same questions we were facing when EU Reach was young, when companies were asking if I start importing goods from third countries, what do I do? If I re-export them, what do I do? If something is exempted, what do I do? So these questions arise again because the supply chains now become more complicated in terms of chemical regulations, but otherwise it's nothing new.
Christian?
Yeah, I mean, of course, initially UK REACH is the copy and paste of the EU REACH, more or less. But I think there are some, at least for downstream users, of course, there will be quite a lot of divergence. I'm afraid there will be a lot of divergence coming in the next few years. And one of the let's say, the most easiest places where we might observe this is with the SVHC list, for example. Mm-hmm. So that is you know, for customer communication, that is that can make a huge difference. Yeah, also, again, you know, for us and for downstream users in the UK, who are certainly becoming importers under UK REACH, so downstream users under EU REACH suddenly become importers under UK REACH, they see a whole new set of obligations coming their way, which of course for quite a big number of EU companies is nothing new, as Thomas explained, but you know, there will be companies, especially I think in the UK, that will be quite heavily affected. And so yeah, we'll have to see, I mean, how this pans out and how much divergence will happen, or if hopefully there will be some further negotiation between the EU and the UK to come to an agreement, an alignment. Let's say the often mentioned chemical annex, to make the regulatory life a bit easier. But I think that's going to be difficult. But let's hope that at least that they stay aligned as much as possible. But my gut feeling is that it will probably diverge. And REACH, of course, is not the only regulation or directive where divergence will most likely occur. So life for companies dealing and working with chemicals and having also dealings with the UK will certainly be more complex, more time-consuming.
As you indicated, with UK REACH introduced, the rules that applied only to certain players in the supply chains now applying to many more companies and industry players, because those who were hidden originally somewhere in the middle of the supply chains could suddenly become naked and needs to comply directly with much more obligations than they were used to. But this brings me also to the topic of SKIP and SVHCs, which basically the obligation has always been there, but with SKIP it was hugely extended to a massive number of players in the supply chains, basically to everybody in the supply chain who is dealing with SVHCs, whereas originally only the manufacturers had real obligations and then just communicated, but now everybody has to notify to ECHA. So it's kind of similar in that sense. During 1 hour session of this webinar, we had 40 questions from the participants. In my eyes, it was quite a huge number, definitely much more questions than during our regular webinars. And out of those 40 questions, most were concerning supply chains. So what should I do if I import from non-EU country, EU country, UK, re-export? What do I do? What obligations do I have? So I expect this will be a topic or question valid also in March or April, before the first deadline in UK REACH. And the second big part of questions we are getting lately are concerning data sharing under UK REACH, which is again another question which will be hugely discussed over the next few months in my expectations. So I'm really looking forward to all the conversations at the conference and meeting with different players from different industries and how they are dealing with these newly arranged supply chains.
Of course, we have to make sure that we can and keep on being allowed to ship our chemical products from the EU to the UK, and so that we can keep on manufacturing our products in the UK. And quite a lot of our chemicals originate from the EU. So in that sense, we'll have to make sure that for us as a downstream user, we comply with the UK REACH, notification procedure to make sure that we can keep on importing our chemicals, make our products, and by set deadlines, be it 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years after the 28th of October this year, to make sure that we have our registrations in place under UK REACH, or to make sure that we have our supply chain in place to ensure compliance with UK REACH regulations with regards to import and use of chemicals in the UK. So yeah, that is something that we are currently focusing on and preparing and thinking about. And yeah, of course, there is for us the uncertainty that we do not know yet if every chemical that we can currently use, for example, will be available under UK REACH. Will our suppliers register under UK REACH, yes or no? Because considering the costs for EU REACH, which are pretty high, if the costs for UK REACH are equal to EU REACH, relatively speaking, it would be more expensive to register on the UK REACH, also because you have basically a smaller market to sell your products on. I'm expecting that will not be the case. Nevertheless, we run the risk that certain chemicals might go away from the UK market, or we'll be forced to additional costs to register ourselves if our suppliers, for example, are unwilling or just don't have the proper business behind it to register on the UK REACH.
If I may add to that, Georgi, when you were asking how this will affect the complex products manufacturers,
very interesting.
In my perspective or in my experience, most of manufacturers of really complex products are typically either large companies or at least mid-sized companies, whereas the hardest impact of UK REACH, again, as usual, is on the small ones and medium ones, because the large ones typically have knowledge, resources, dedicated departments which are monitoring these issues and regulatory landscape, and they know what to do. But a lot of those small ones will be facing for the first time questions like, are you REACH compliant? Do you have registration? If they become, from the downstream user role, if they become importers, or on the other hand, exporters to the EU, they will, a lot of them will hear these questions for the first time. And we've been there with EU REACH, that small ones and mid-size companies, a lot of them weren't just aware of their obligations.
Or if they're in the supply chain for the tier 1 manufacturers as well.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Or if they are in the supply chain of tier 1 manufacturing companies as well, if they're the suppliers.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah. We would, I believe, from the 25-minute podcast, we dedicated quite enough time for the UK REACH. There is one more very interesting topic about basically chemical management and skip. I would like to elaborate a little bit more because as part of the, let's say, presentation which Christian will be covering is going to be the EU, chemical strategy for sustainability. Then we have another presenter which would be from Aplia, and they would be, Lara. She would be talking about hierarchical structure of EU chemical legislation, REACH, ROCS, SKIP, and WEE. But we definitely heard Christian speak before about the on the SKIP compliance and making a workable SKIP database conference. So definitely it would be interesting to hear out something related to SKIP as a part of this particular episode. Christian, if you may.
Sure. So, the SKIP database, let's say, went live earlier this January, January 5th, when the notification should be in. Now, for the SKIP database, it is important to realize that, again, it concerns SVHCs. And so every company that has an SVHC in one of its products has to notify this within the database. And so that ultimately, it is known where SVHCs and chemicals of concern reside in the products that we make. And so the opportunity that this SKIP database brings to, let's say, society is to the way I see it, to be able to create clean waste streams, again, relating back to circular economy and European Green Deal, to make sure that we can use waste as a safe resource, raw material for new products. And if I look at the opportunities there, I mean, for us, we were well prepared in the sense that we are working for a long time already with a program within the company to eliminate hazardous chemicals as much as possible. So for us, the initial deadline was not too much of an issue, as we have very limited amount of products with SVHCs. We have relatively simple products. As I explained, we make lemonade. So compared to a car, or even a bicycle, I mean, it's relatively easy. So from that perspective, I think the SKIP database, depending, I guess, also on, I see it a lot of positive things, because you learn a lot about your supply chain, you communicate a lot more with your supply chain. The benefits, the potential benefits for society and for recycling are there. There is a lot of data. The question, of course, is what happens with all these data that is being gathered within the SKIP database? How will it be presented? What will be shown to recyclers and consumers? So you and me, we can go in there and check if our product contains one. And if the data provided, and I think that would be important feedback for making sure that the SKIP database will remain a successful let's say, tool for us to create non-toxic waste. And non-toxicity is also another goal of the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability. How recyclers view the data they can access. How usable is it to them? Can they manage to eliminate the hazardous chemicals from their products, from the waste that they're getting? And so that is, I think, one of the most important aspects that hopefully we in the near future can hear from recyclers how they feel about it, how useful they find it. And on the other side, like I explained, we have relatively simple articles. It is also imperative to know how manufacturers of complex articles like cars or whatever, how they can let's say, comply with the SCIP database, how good they can collect and obtain their data, or if there is a lot of uncertainty in the data. And I think those are very, let's say, important things to learn about, and to make sure that all the good that the SCIP database potentially can do can be achieved.
Tomás?
Well, I could sign that, what Christian just said. To me, that is the biggest question. I can already see a lot of benefits, as Christian mentioned, but that's the biggest question: how all these data which will be collected will be exploited to its full potential, and how useful it will be for the recyclers, consumers, and everybody. If I may take a parallel, it reminds me a little bit of REACH registration and REACH authorizations, REACH restrictions, where the REACH registration process is a process for collecting data, nothing else, nothing more. It's collecting data about chemicals. So we are then able to decide which chemicals are really concerning, how we will regulate them, replace them, which is the authorization and restrictions process. And let's face it, so far there hasn't been really huge successes with replacing the most concerning chemicals. There are some improvements. There are some starting success stories, but still the challenge of replacing the most hazardous chemicals is still ahead of us. Things like I don't know, chromium in electroplating, bisphenol A was restricted or is trying to be replaced, but for certain chemicals we still don't have alternatives. It is definitely a necessary step to collect all the data, to be then focusing on critical parts of the product manufacturing cycles, but then what we do with the data is what will matter. Well, I can share what the position of the Czech enforcement authorities are, what the position of the Czech enforcement authorities is, and what they publicly say at conferences, and I can only agree with them. So far, the Waste Framework Directive hasn't been transposed yet into national legislation. Before it is done, before it is transposed, we don't really make any plans. We are not really preparing for enforcement activities or schemes. First law and then enforcement.
Yeah, if I may continue on that. So I think, as with everything, and also with REACH registration, enforcement is important for for making sure that there are no which regulators call free riders often, just to make sure again that there is a level playing field. And again, I think we should realize that this whole concept, and I think it relates to, coming back to the Green Deal and the chemical strategy, it is of importance for us, and as Thomas explained previously already, as a society. This is more than industry versus industry or industry versus regulator. We need to see this in a much broader sense. And I believe that if we truly want to go, and this is what Frans Timmermans has said with the Green Deal, we want Europe to transition to being climate neutral, to using waste as a resource. So basically also for Europe to be less dependent on raw materials that we cannot source in Europe, because again, also geopolitical things come into play then if you look at raw materials. Then we will have to make sure that if we are going to make a lot of products using recycled materials, that we know what we're recycling, because otherwise, basically we're back to square one, and that is definitely not the way forward. So, and I think, and this is also what is being an action point within the chemical strategy for sustainability, is that indeed, and I guess so recognized also at a political level in the EU, that enforcement on regulations, being it Waste Framework Directive, being it REACH, being it on RoHS or SKIP, it needs to be done better to ensure level playing field, I believe, but also our own safety and health, and if I put it very dramatically, our future.
It was my pleasure to host you at this podcast episode, and we'll be seeing each other already on the conference and on the continuation of the podcast on UK European Union post-Brexit chemical management landscape. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.